Hi guys, Mimi G here. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a sew along for one of my new Simplicity patterns, 9714, which is a casual blazer and pants or shorts. Now this is not a learn to sew video, so if you need further help, you might consider visiting my online sewing and design school, sewitacademy.com, where the first 5 classes are free through our free trial and no credit card is required. Let's get started. All right, guys, we're gonna work with my Mimi G pattern 9714. We're gonna start with view A, which is the jacket. Remember that the back of the envelope always gives you a list of suggested fabrics or any notions. In this case, the jacket doesn't require any notions. Let's go over the pattern pieces that you're gonna need to cut. You're gonna cut pattern piece 2, which is our pocket. You're gonna cut 2. You're gonna cut our pattern piece number 3, which is our flap. You're gonna cut 4, and then you're gonna cut 2 of interfacing. You're gonna cut out pattern piece number 8. This is our front facing. You're gonna cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. You're gonna cut out pattern piece number 4. This is our tie end, and you're gonna cut 2. You're gonna cut out pattern piece number 9. This is our back facing. You're going to cut 1 on the fold and then 1 on the fold of interfacing. You have pattern piece 6 and 7. Number 7 is our under collar. You're gonna cut 2 of fabric and 2 of interfacing. Pattern piece number 6 is our upper collar. You're gonna cut 2 of fabric and also 2 of interfacing. You're gonna cut out pattern piece number 10. This is our sleeve, and you're gonna cut 2. You're also gonna cut out pattern piece number 1. This is our front, and you're gonna cut 2. Make sure to transfer all of the dot to markings that you see. And finally, you're gonna cut out pattern piece number 5, which is our back, and you're gonna cut 2. Once you have everything cut out and interfaced, we can start sewing. Now, before we get started, make sure that you stay stitch the front of your front pieces where we're gonna be attaching our collar, and also the neckline on the back. We're gonna go ahead and first stitch together our center back seam. So let's go ahead and with right sides facing, we can pin. Okay, now with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're just gonna stitch starting at the hem, working our way up using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. All right, let's go ahead and work on our pockets. So what you're gonna do is you should have a marking where your fold line was. You're gonna go ahead and pin that right sides facing. I like to give myself a guide. So what you're gonna do is you're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, starting at the very top, working your way all the way around and stopping at the other end. Make sure to back stitch. Now the guide helps me when I'm turning and pressing. So the next thing you're gonna wanna do is, because you have curved corners here, you're gonna want to do a really small basting stitch, maybe just like from this center of the curve, about 1.5 inches in each direction. I used a 4.5 length stitch, and you're just gonna do 1 row. That way what you can do is you can pull your stitches and then distribute that gather. So when you turn this around to press it, the corner will sort of fall onto itself, and it'll make it much easier for you to press that corner as opposed to trying to do it without those gathering stitches. So I don't do 2 rows, I only do 1 row, and I literally just use it to pull enough that this will turn to the inside, lay nice and flat, and then when you press it, you end up with no puckers. So I did one for you guys so you guys can see. So I've gone ahead and did my gathering, I pulled my stitches, and then when you press it, it gives you nice rounded corners without any puckers. Once you do that and give it a good press, you can go ahead and top stitch the top. I'm not gonna top stitch mine, I'm gonna leave mine loose, but if you want to top stitch, you can go ahead and top stitch there. Then you're gonna grab your pocket flaps. You should have 1 interfaced and 1 that's not interfaced. And with right sides facing, you're gonna go ahead and pin those together. Okay, now head to your sewing machine. You're gonna prepare both your pockets, and then you're gonna stitch your pocket flaps using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Go ahead and trim off your seam allowance, turn it right side out, and give it a good press. All right, guys, once you have your pocket flap done and you prepped your pocket, we're gonna go ahead and sew it onto one of our fronts. So I'm gonna start with my pocket first, and you should have 2 dots where your pocket placement goes. So I am going to pin, and then I'm gonna pin at the bottom Okay, now you're gonna go to your sewing machine and you're gonna edge stitch all the way around your pocket. All right, once your pocket is in place, we're gonna go ahead and place our pocket flap. So first you're gonna place your pocket flap between those markings, and I like to pin it in place. Okay, now you're gonna go ahead and stitch your pocket down. I use 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. After you stitch it down, what you're gonna do is you're going to fold it down, press it, then you're gonna go ahead and top stitch 3/8 of an inch from the folded edge. All right, you should have both your pockets done, so we can go ahead and set this aside for just a second. I want you to grab your ties. You're gonna fold it in half the long way. We're gonna stitch across the bottom and then along the long way, so you wanna make sure and pin this. You're gonna stitch this using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. I want you to trim away your seam allowance after you're done. Turn it right side out and give it a good press so that you end up with 2 ties. All right, once you have your ties, we're gonna go ahead and place them onto our fronts. So I want you to grab your left front, and you should have 2 markings where your tie is gonna go. On the left front, it goes on the side seam, in between those dots. Okay, and you're just gonna stitch that down. On your right front, it goes in the front, not the side seam. So you should have 2 dots here where you're gonna be placing it. Pin and go ahead and stitch both of your ties down. All right, we're gonna go ahead and stitch our shoulders together. So I have my front to back, right sides facing. I'm gonna go ahead and pin. Okay, using a straight stitch, you're just gonna stitch across your shoulders using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then grab your collar and your upper collar and then meet me back here. All right, so I've got my 2 upper collar pieces and my 2 under collar pieces. Right sides are facing. We're gonna start first with the under collar. So you're gonna go ahead and place them again. Like I said, right sides facing. We're gonna stitch the center back together using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin. You're gonna pin your upper collar pieces, also right sides facing the same way. Go ahead and pin. Okay, now go to the machine and you're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're gonna do the same thing for your upper and lower collars. Okay, once you've joined your upper and your under collars, we're gonna place them on top of each other with right sides facing. First, you wanna make sure that the seams are aligned, so go ahead and pin there first. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and pin along the top, the curve. Now you see this little cutout, that is for our collar. So I want you to make sure that you transferred those markings because we're gonna be sewing and then following that guide until we reach the bottom. Okay, so we're gonna start in the middle and you're gonna work your way in one direction, then start back in the middle and work your way in the other direction. So you're gonna start in the middle, you're going to stitch, we're using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to get to your marking, follow the marking, that's also 5/8 of an inch from that edge, 5/8 of an inch all the way here. Then you're gonna start back at the center and work your way in the other direction. The bottom section stays open so we can turn our collar right side out. All right, now that we've sewn our collars together, we're gonna go ahead and trim this seam allowance and cut into our little triangle here, but wanna be careful not to cut through your stitches. So I'm gonna take this down to about 1/4 inch. Now I'm gonna cut really close to that very, very tip without cutting through my stitches. You're gonna do the same thing on the other side, then you're gonna turn this right side out and give it a press. Okay, so once you have your collars sewn together and you've turned it right side out and you've pressed it, go ahead and baste the 2 bottom raw edges together. Now we're gonna go ahead and pin it to the jacket. So I'm gonna start at the center back. I'm gonna line up the center back seam of my collar with the center back seam on the jacket. You should have transferred markings. You're gonna go ahead and pin down one direction and then you're gonna work your way from the center back to the other side. You have a notch there. You wanna make sure you're lining your notch up. Okay, now you're gonna go ahead and stitch this down. You're gonna start in the middle, work your way down one end using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, then start back in the middle and work your way in the other direction. All right, once we have our collar attached, we're gonna work on our facing. So I'm gonna set this aside. You're gonna grab your back facing and your front facings. You're gonna pin them to the shoulders. All right, go ahead and stitch your shoulders together, press your seams, and then you're gonna wanna finish the outer part of your facing. So whether you're serging it, if I had more time, I would be finishing all of my seams off with bias binding, but for the sake of the tutorial, I'm just gonna serge all the way around, and then we're gonna go ahead and attach this to our jacket. Okay, so we have our facing put together. I went ahead and serged all the way around. We're gonna go ahead and pin it to our jacket. So just like we did with our collar, and your collar's laying flat, you're gonna do the same thing. You're gonna go ahead and, with right sides facing, place your facing over the entire jacket. I'm gonna first match up my shoulder seams. Match up my other shoulder seam. Okay, now you're just gonna pin your facing all the way down. Okay, you're gonna pin the same way in the other direction, and then sewing through all thicknesses, you're gonna sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay guys, once you have your facing in, make sure and understitch your facing and give it a good press to the inside. It should be laying nice and flat. Now we're gonna go ahead and do our side seams. So we're gonna turn this so that right sides are facing each other. Make sure your tie on one side is to the inside. And you're gonna go ahead and pin your side seams together. Okay, you're gonna pin your other side seam the same way. While you're at the machine, however, I'm gonna have you do your sleeve. So grab one sleeve. You're gonna do the same thing to the other sleeve. With right sides facing, we're gonna go ahead and pin our underarm seam. Okay, you're gonna head to your sewing machine. You're gonna do both your sleeves, stitching starting at the hem of your sleeve, working your way up using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Then you're gonna sew your side seams of your jacket the same way, starting at the hem and working your way up. All right, let's go ahead and attach our sleeves. You're gonna turn your sleeve right side out. I like working from the inside. You're first gonna pin and align that side seam to the underarm seam. Then you wanna make sure that you match up your notches. And then I'm gonna go ahead and match up that shoulder dot to my shoulder seam. And now I'm gonna ease this in. Now, you could do 2 rows of easing stitches, but I actually prefer to clip in between to give myself some ease versus doing the rows of gathering. So I'm gonna go ahead and pin. I might need a couple snips there. You're snipping into the jacket, not your sleeve, and make sure you snip no more than 3/8 of an inch. You don't wanna go past what that seam allowance is gonna be. And that just sort of opens up and it gives you a lot more space so that you can ease that sleeve cap in. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. Just gonna need 1 or 2. Okay, now you're gonna go to your sewing machine, you're gonna stitch together your sleeve using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're gonna pin and sew your other sleeve the same way. All right guys, once your sleeves are attached, we are actually almost done. So for the bottom, I'm gonna actually blind stitch my hem and the hem of my sleeve because this is kind of a fancy jacket. But if you are going to do it by machine, that's fine too. I just wanted to show you this front facing part. So you're gonna turn your facing onto your jacket, right sides are facing. And go ahead and just pin this. And what you're gonna do, if you didn't notice here, I marked my seam allowance, which is 1 1/4 inches. So I made some little dots here and that's gonna be my guide. And you're just gonna stitch from the start of your facing to the end of your jacket. You're gonna do the same thing on the other side, and then we're going to trim and turn it over. All right, so I have the stitch down. We're gonna go ahead and trim some of this. I want you to start trimming, but you're gonna stop 5/8 of an inch before you get to the end of your facing. And then if you need to trim that little corner, you can. You're gonna turn this to the right side, poke out your corner. You're gonna give this a really good press. Now, if you're just gonna machine stitch it, then you would machine stitch it like you would any other hem. I'm gonna baste because it's a fancy kind of jacket and I want a nice basted seam as a hem as opposed to a machine stitch. So I'm gonna press my entire hem allowance, which is 1 1/4 inches, and then I'm gonna pin it, and then I'm going to hand stitch it. So whichever you choose to do, that's what you're gonna follow. Once you're done with that, you're gonna go ahead and do the hem of your sleeve, and you are all done. All right, guys, as usual, I hope you enjoyed this sew along. If you make my pattern, please post it on your socials and tag me at Mimi G Style. I love to see your guys' makes. Until next time, peace.